Good afternoon to all of you that join us in the UK today, and good morning to all of you who are in Brazil. Today, the Tax Committee of the Brazilian Chamber brings to our discussion an important theme: the funding of infrastructure projects in Brazil through financial instruments that benefit from zero or reduce withholding income tax on the respective earnings. This is a topic, of course, of great relevance to companies working in building the infrastructure that the country needs so much and on its finance. It is therefore an excellent initiative of our tax committee, and we are all eager to learn more about recent developments in this area. So big thanks to Gustavo Braga, head of our tax committee and founding partner of BBSA, Braga and Bastos Advogados, for conceiving and organizing this seminar. I would also like to thank our speakers today. André Carvalho, tax partner at Veirano Advogados, who will be giving us the Brazilian legal perspective on the matter, and Isabela da Costa Mendes, founding partner and co-CEO at Impacta Global on the UK investor perspective. Finally, and as I always do before I ask Gustavo to open our works today, I would like to say a few words on our housekeeping rules, which are the following. There will be a Q&A session today, and questions can be asked via the Teams chat box. So please feel free to type and send your questions to our speakers during the whole seminar. Also, please note that this webinar is being recorded and that the recording of this session will be posted at the Chamber's website and social media platforms in the next few days. So with that said, thanks very much again, and over to you, Gustavo.
Thank you, Vera. Thanks, everyone, joining us today. In addition to Vera's important remarks about the housekeeping rules, I just also add that the typing of questions in the chat box, when you do it, please identify yourself and the institution or company that you belong, so we have a better, have it properly registered when you submit the questions. Also, a very special thanks for our panelists, Isabela and André. We're privileged to have you here today on discussing these important topics. As we all know, Brazil desperately needs infrastructure investment. And we're here today to, as Vera pointed out, discuss some of the tax incentives applicable to these to such investments, but also some questions that have arisen in connection with how to apply the new rules, the new consumption taxation stemming from the tax reform approved last year and to be implemented. Also some brand new features as the Gás para Empregar program and the low carbon hydrogen that might benefit from very substantive tax credits as a means to incentive to foster that kind of activity in Brazil, which of course it makes total sense to pave the way for on the energy transition towards a zero carbon economy. On our panelists, just a brief words. It's interesting that I realized after we organized the event and talked together, after knowing a bit more about them, similar features. Lawyers, internationally acknowledged. Isabela has an NYU LLM. André has a Vienna University LLM. But not only both have amazing academic achievements, they are highly skilled and experienced professionals in practice, in projects that in infrastructure projects, which are the focus of our meeting today. So as per our program, we will first have André sharing with us his views on the legal structure, the legal framework of the incentives that we're about to address, and his comments on some of the issues that might arise. And after André's presentation, we'll have Isabela bringing her perspective as an investor as a foreign investor based in UK on her view on those investments in Brazil. No further ado, André, if we can please have your words, and I think you have some slides to share, right? So please make them available.
Sure. So thank you, Gustavo Braga, Vera, for the kind invitation. I'm honored to be here in such a group of experts, and Gustavo Braga is an old friend and a tax practitioner that I admire a lot. We have worked in the past, super expert on infrastructure, oil and gas. So I was really happy with the invitation and the opportunity to be here along with you all. I would only make a disclaimer before I share my slides. I mean, I just came from a 10-day holiday and I may not be updated. We know that things in Brazil are quite dynamic and the tax developments we really have to keep up to date on a daily basis. So yes, so just a disclaimer that some of the information that I should have on top of my mind, and I really try to have a rest during this deserved holiday. So let me start with sharing some slides that we would understand. Yes, you see the slides. So yes, it's just some um, lines here. We know that I mean in Brazil, just like elsewhere, I mean tax incentives play a crucial role on the development of infrastructure. I mean, it has always been like this in Brazil. In the past, we have, I mean, during the PAC, maybe if we go back 20 years in the former Lula administration, we had the REIGI, and some tax incentives really that all big projects really relied upon in Brazil, namely to have some waivers on some purchases for the project. And we could say that REIDI, the acronym, for those who are not familiar, is the REIDI. We say REIDI was a very important, let's say, tool to foster big infrastructure projects that most of them might not pay off. This would naturally be a subject more for Isabella down the road, but at least for some experience we have had in the past, these some projects would not really fly without these help of the government. Okay, we know that in some jurisdictions this could raise issues for state aid, and there are discussions on competitiveness and let's say general agreements, international disputes. But it is what it is. If we look for the recent past, we have, for instance, in the US, the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, and many other tax incentives that are put in place by the governmental authorities to foster projects. And that's even more observed now in a period of energy transition. We know that new technologies, especially towards a reduction of the carbon footprint, sometimes they take a while to really pay off as compared to the existing technologies. And in many cases, the the difference or the anticipation or for the implementation of any such technologies are pretty much based on governmental incentives, including, in most cases, tax incentives. So um, here in this slide, yes, we just have some information, introduction on some figures. I mean, I will skip it. The slides, I think, will be shared with the audience, and these will be naturally recorded in the video. So I will spare the audience from reading this initial introduction, and yes, go for straight for some let's say um, some selected tax incentives here for infrastructure projects. As I said, would say if we go back some 20 plus years, we might have the REGI as the big tool for the development of big infrastructure projects in Brazil. And if we go back to 2011, there was the introduction of the so-called debêntures incentivadas. In English, we would say the incentivized debentures, the purpose of which they were designed to encourage investments in specific selected areas of infrastructure projects, for instance, energy, transportation, and the benefits here would be to the investors. So for any individuals, like any of us here, if we would like to have, let's say, a fixed income investment in Brazil, right, without having an additional 15 to 22 in general income tax with cut or withholding tax on your yields, right? You might invest as an individual in these types of debentures, right, on private placements or sorry, on public offerings of companies to have the benefit of not having this tax payment on your yields. There are some other products, fixed income products, that also have a similar uh, tax incentive, mainly related to the agribusiness and to real estate, the LCAs, LCIs, CRAs, CRIs, and then that was the products that really enjoyed this exemption in the past, and then we have seen a great number and a success of the incentivized debentures as a tool to foster infrastructure projects. And here we see in these, and apologies, so the see, here for we see that the use of the incentivized debenture, I mean, it's really a success over the years. Um, More recent, right, there were some key changes to the so-called incentivized debentures, right, based on Law 14801 and Decree 11964, both of 2024. And so the key changes that we have observed recently is that the regulations may waiver the prior ministerial approval for projects in the so-called priority sectors uh, of infrastructure. And the regulations may also establish new criteria and measures to encourage the development of projects that offer significant environmental or social benefits. We really see, as now in the current, let's say, mindset of the tax authority, let's say this green mindset, we really see that it's, I mean, whenever President Lula is traveling abroad, we have this speech of let's say of that the reduction of the carbon footprint is definitely a a a principle that is governing the current tax policy, right? So we are on the verge of the tax reform, and we will touch upon the impacts of the tax reform on existing projects. The maintenance of the REGI was one of the big, let's say, issues that have been discussed to date, and what we currently see is that there is definitely these principle governing the current tax policy, right? Reimbursement period for expenses or debts funded through incentivized debentures will be gradually extended up to 37 months. And there are also new rules for infrastructure targeted debentures, bonds, and funds. Right, the withholding income tax relief on the interest from debentures issued abroad. So this is a new feature, right? Provided they are intended to fund infrastructure projects in Brazil, right? So the issuer may deduct interests from the corporate income tax and social contribution. That's a very relevant point. And also exclude 30% of the interest paid during the fiscal year from the real profit, from the actual profit regime, and also from the social contribution on profits. That basically an extension of the corporate income tax with a combined rate of 34% in Brazil. Still a very high rate as compared to other OECD jurisdictions, we know, but that's the reality that we have here in Brazil. There is also the possibility to issue debentures with exchange variation clauses, and there is a limitation that such debentures cannot be acquired by related parties of the issuer, including those located abroad. What are the eligible sectors for these tax incentives? So according to the decree, we have transportation infrastructure, including highways, railways, public and private ports, and airports. Energy, so energy is a broad concept, but it will include the renewable energy projects, uh, transmission and distribution of power, and natural gas and biofuel, among others. Telecom is also a sector that is incentivized, basic sanitation, urban mobility, social infrastructure, including public health care and education. Um, so uh, here, as Gustavo Braga mentioned, we also have recent legal modifications on low carbon hydrogen, right? There was the creation of the program for the development of the low carbon emission hydrogen. So there is always what is the correct acronym. Green hydrogen. So you have all the palette of colors. So we see that the law adopts this definition of PHBC, or low carbon hydrogen. Um, and actually, it's here as a bill of law. As I said, I had this disclaimer that I was on holidays and really not trying to 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 look on my emails. But if I'm not mistaken, I think this was already converted into law. But what the issue here is that we have the granting of social, it's a kind of a financial aid on the social contribution. So there are credits that we already have. We have the government with lots of concerns on its budget, so there is a limit of 18 plus billion reais of credits in low carbon hydrogen projects for producers and consumers. This is still a little bit unclear on how these will work, pending further regulations. There are some timing issues on the projects. So, because there was a 5-year limitation, especially for the Hydro a tax incentive that's basically what we'd call a Haiti for the low carbon hydrogen projects. And so, in principle, these social contribution on profits, the CSL credits, may be used to offset other federal taxes or even reimbursed in cash. Everyone that has an experience in Brazil knows that a refund in cash can be challenging in Brazil, right? So this is even a big discussion that we have on the tax reform on our new dual VAT that will be introduced. But yes, there is the legal possibility, even though that in practice that might not be that easy as we have it is in black and white. So taxpayers must be registered with the tax authorities as per regulations to be issued. So there will be a strict control of the taxpayers that will benefit. There will be a kind of bid of the projects that will be able to access these incentive, and the tax credits applicable on will be applicable on transactions carried out as of January 1st up to the end of 2032. So this is an issue that the government's really putting pressure. And again, during these period I was away, there was also the decree, the publication of decree 12153, that is the Gás para Empregar program, that has the objectives of so really creating a legal framework to increase legal certainty on the investments in the natural gas chain. So the idea is to increase the natural gas supply and enhance the availability of the molecule in the domestic market to meeting a growing demand. We know that the natural gas has a key role in the energy transition. In Brazil, there is not possible to achieve, let's say, all the standards and targets for 2050 if there is not the utilization of the natural gas. Right, we have already some infrastructure. We have three big pipelines in Brazil, one coming from Bolivia, one and another that linking the north to the southern part of Brazil, divided in two, let's say, holders, one for the southern, one for the northern region. The northern region is more a dynamic market for the gas there, and Brazil, I mean, really shifting from a scenario of where there was no competition. There was the one only big player, that was Petrobras, on the whole gas chain, stemming from the production to the distribution. And now we have several players and the need for, let's say, more certainty. I mean, usually the tax comes after the regulations. So we have lots of demands from the projects, from the owners, from the users, from the buyers of natural gas. So there was really the need for some regulations, and the Gás para Empregar is really, let's say, a landmark, a milestone on this. So the idea is that it will reduce the price, the consumer cost. It will lower the price of natural gas, and also regulate the conditions for non-discriminatory and negotiated access to natural gas offloading, treatment, processing, and storage infrastructure. Each of these activities will trigger a number of tax issues, right? So we have already had some big the ajustes CNF is, so some, let's say, national rules on regulating basically the treatment of regasification and the processing of the gas of the natural gas. But there is still lots of tax issues that are still open and as the market evolves. For instance, we still, I mean, this will change by 2033, but we will still have a federation with, let's say, a tax federation where we have the federal taxes and our VAT is a state tax, so we need each state to regulate how it will treat the ICMS treatment in a typical gas to power project, right? We would have a jetty terminal where we would have an FSRU, a floating storage or regasification unit that would receive the liquefied natural gas that would come from overseas. So there would be a ship-to-ship connection. So this gas tanker would unload the gas cargo to this FSRU that would do the regasification and have the molecule in its as natural gas, right, in its state, so that it would be used in a thermoelectrical plant, or it would be put in the grid to be transported to a user in a different location. To date, what we have seen is some states having already some regulations giving a deferral of the ICMS tax on the importation of the LNG towards the moment that the energy is produced at a thermoelectrical gas-fueled plant. So there is a deferral of the VAT up to the moment that the energy is put on the grid. This is naturally seems a simple solution. Many projects, more than 5, are already using these benefits in different states across the country. But we are facing some issues like, okay, the regulations, the state tax regulations are usually drafted to accommodate a single user terminal, a terminal that would have a big owner that would be importing the gas, doing the regasification activities, and also owning the thermoelectrical plant. But what if we want to introduce a model as you have in Europe to have a multi-users terminals, right? Sometimes a final investment decision in a big project like this is only viable if you have more than one sponsor or landmark user. So we have lots of challenges because once you import the molecule and it is in the tanks of the FSRU, I mean, if it is in the name of a given holder, and if there is a dispatch for the other user of the terminal, there would be ICMS tax efficiency because that natural gas is still as a LNG, as in its liquid state, would need to be transferred, even though it's only a borrowing and lending, because at the end of the day, they use the users offset and say, okay, if I need, let's say, this BTUs, this volume of energy from you, I use it, and then next time you can use you have the same volume in my cargo. But they should work, I mean, as a tax neutral loans in kind, but this is one of the biggest issues of projects in Brazil, these ICMS tax uncertainties on multi-users terminals. So the market is really claiming for, let's say, improvements on the current regulations, namely Ajuste CNF 318, right, to regulate in more details some of these issues. I'm running out of time. I mean, we still have, we'll quickly go through some of the biggest issues that we faced on the consumption tax, on the constitutional reform that was brought about by a constitutional amendment back in December 23. And we have discussions of bills of law throughout 2024 that will regulate the so-called dual VAT that we will have in Brazil, the IBS and the CBS, that will um, substitute the ISS, a municipal service tax, the state VAT as we know with the ICMS, and a federal VAT that is the PIS/COFINS, and an excise tax that is the IPI. So it's the idea is that we have a simplification of the regime after it's fully implemented by 2033. But naturally, there will be a coexistence of two regimes until then, bringing lots of uncertainties and complexities for the taxpayers for the tax compliance during this period. There is also lots of discussions on the IS, on the selective tax. And I mean, the idea is that IBS and CBS in general will broaden the scope of application for some activities, because currently in Brazil, because of this dichotomy of ISS for services and ICMS for goods, there are some activities that are sometimes not taxed by either tax. A rental of premises, for instance, is it a service, is it a good? So intangibles. So the idea is with the new VAT in Brazil, there will be no more such discussions on what is creditable or what is the nature of the underlying taxable activity. So there are lots of uncertainties, as I said. So the definition of the rates of the IBS and CBS, it's ranging from 26 to 28. Let's see, it will depend on also on the impacts of the selective tax, right? On what will be the treatment of existing credits in the hands of the taxpayers. We know, I have already said that refunding cash in Brazil can be tricky or not existing at all, right? And also, how will the existing tax incentives will be treated after the tax reform, right?
But I have to invite you to conclude, please. Yes.
Yes. So here, yes, it's the conclusion. So we still have lots of issues to tackle, and I will be happy. Sorry for going over time, and I will be happy to touch any of the issues in our Q&A time in the end. Sorry. Thanks for this, Braga. Thanks for everyone.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you very much for your presentation. And if I can get one line from your excellent information is, so many new things happening, so many changes happening. And if I'm not mistaken, and then Isabella can really follow up on that, for the investor, incentives are welcome, but stable rules are far more important. And what a big challenge we're facing ahead in Brazil, I guess, right, Isabella? Yeah, Isabella, you're on mute.
I'm not on mute. Can you hear me? I'm not on mute. Maybe I'm muted by you. Mute.
Okay.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. We can.
Okay. I don't know. Okay. So thank you. I think from a foreign investor's point of view, I think you touched on an important point, which is sort of stability of rules are quite important. So just as an introduction, obviously is going to be an important part of our quite a lot of the taxes, obviously, they are a
Isabella, the call's breaking a lot. We couldn't hear you very well, I'm afraid.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, but it was breaking a bit.
Okay, so I'm switching off the camera just for a second.
All right.
So what is important is that a public policy defines tax incentives are a matter of public policy. And I think we have to applaud Brazil for, to some extent, creating tax incentives that will lead to more investment into green projects, right? Brazil, compared to other countries, has a remarkable track record in funding infrastructure projects through capital markets. Other emerging market has the depth of capital markets that Brazil has. Part of that has been the tax incentives for individuals, right? That, you know, to have individuals investing in long-term bonds in infrastructure projects is something unique to Brazil. That really is something that is quite in Brazilian bonds. You have the of course, they do an amazing.
Isabella, I'm afraid the call is breaking again. Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Hello?
No.
I'm afraid we're having some technical issues, maybe connection issues. Hello?
Yes, I don't know.
Okay, you're back. You're back. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So I was going to say the fact that the government took away the tax incentives for other instruments made investment go a lot into infrastructure debentures, right? So that tied pricing a lot. So that impacts pricing, so that it's good for companies that are funding projects sometimes below the levels where the government funds because of the tax incentives, but that is a deterrent to foreign investment. So a stability in the rules is very, very important for foreign capital to come in. In particular, what you add to that is the currency risk, right? The volatility of the currency is a concern. So the IDB is working with the Brazilian government into giving a subsidized line to help borrowers borrow in local in foreign currency, hedge their exposure in order to invest in projects in Brazil. So all these things for 450. There's sometimes that we need to.
No, I don't know if we lost you again, Isabella.
No, I am still here. Can you hear me still?
Now we can. All right, thank you.
Yeah. So from a foreign investor's perspective, I think that the stability of the rules and then the ability of hedging, of lending perhaps in foreign currency and allowing borrowers through that the subsidized hedging line hedge the currency exposure will really contribute to additional foreign investment into the Brazilian local capital markets.
Thank you, Isabella. Thank you very much. Yeah, indeed. These are crucial points. I'm not. Perhaps you agree that some of those aspects might have been addressed by the revamping of the debentures rule, enabling that they have foreign exchange nomination.
Yes.
Right. So
absolutely.
Maybe we can also invite now some of the persons attending our event. If you'd like to submit questions using the chat box, please just say your name, your institution or company you work with, and if you'd like to address some queries to our panelists. I will start as a means to also to break the ice a bit, asking Andrea, if I'm not mistaken, Andrea, please correct me if I'm wrong, but my reading of the new revamped debenture rules seems to have excluded oil projects, and oil projects were some of those substantively comprised within the former tax exempt debenture rules. And also, to my impression, I could not find express mention to hydrogen. In your view, what do you think about? Do you agree that oil is no longer encompassed, or would still be within the energy sector that the new decree mentions? And what about hydrogen? Do you think that it's clear that it is there, or we would need some additional regulations making this literal?
Yes, Gustavo. Yeah, we had this discussion. I tend to agree with you. We didn't see oil and gas project. So if an operator of an E&P concession, for instance, would like to have funding through the debentures, that is tricky, and especially given this, let's say, this new mindset that I mentioned of the tax authority. Now we have a kind of a dilemma, right? So we want to have to shift to, let's say, to green taxes, and have a component that the tax incentives will drive investments towards, let's say, greener projects. But we still, so there is all the discussions on the equatorial margin, for instance. The equatorial margin, for those that are not acquainted with the industry, is, let's say, is an area that apparently is very prolific in reservoirs. It's very close to the Guyanas, where there is a huge production. ExxonMobil and their partners are really having lots of productions just across not across the street. I mean, if right, but it should be the same, let's say, geologic characteristics, and there are all those discussions. I mean, no one can really get an environmental permit to do exploration in that area. So we see, so these clashes is still in, let's say, in the tax policy. My view to reply to your questions, that oil and gas projects are not there. And I don't know. I mean, it's somewhat, especially given that it is a tax incentive that, and we have these regulations, the National Tax Code, that any tax incentive provisions and regulations shall be construed on a narrow way. So we cannot really expand the list and say that oil and gas at the end of the day is energy, and simply say that it should be comprised in the overall energy group, especially when we have definitions of specific sectors in the energy segment that would be benefited by the rules. So our views here, subject to confirmation and with on further regulations that might come, that oil and gas projects are not comprised, and for low carbon hydrogen, yes, what we saw, I mean, there was these discussions on the Hydro, and so I think because it's two, let's say, sets of regulations that were being discussed more or less at the same time at our parliament, that is also involved with all the bills for the regulations for the tax reform itself. So I understand it's not there, low carbon hydrogen yet. Then we might, depending try to put it in the energy, but again, we might face the same issues towards a narrow interpretation that we have with oil and gas projects. But my guess is that, I mean, it may, if we have, let's say, the framework for low carbon hydrogen, that in the future they might qualify, but we might need some further regulations on that, if you will.
Thank you, Andre. Isabella, if I can also make your question, what I heard and found it very interesting from your presentation is you do mention that there's some sort of competition. If the government decides to enable tax incentives for natural persons to invest directly on the debentures, that sort of pushes away institutional investors looking at Brazil and finding it an attractive destination for their funds, for their money at the end of the day. Well, so what came to my mind is, do you think that in addition to this competition internally between natural persons and institutional investors based on the types of incentives that the government has decided to create, would you agree that there's some sort of also international competition among jurisdictions? For instance, in your case, a fund based in the UK, I imagine that you look to many other possibilities in different countries, and how tax plays a role on that kind of decision of where are you going to invest?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. I think that's better. I switched that. I think, I mean, at the end of the day, something sort of cruel to say, but taxation, withholding tax for foreign investment, punishes the borrower always, right? Because it's just a cost of borrowing. And when investors internationally, they are looking at the net return. They will look at the net yield of the investment. So if there's a withholding tax, it increases the cost of borrowing for the borrower. I do think Brazil in generally, for let's say senior debt locally, prices quite tightly, right? And this is really a testament to the success of developing local capital markets in depth. It really is a success story in Brazil that no other country has in emerging markets. None of the other larger economies, or Mexico or South Africa, Nigeria, they don't have the depth of this market. So that's really a positive because it lowers the cost of borrowing. Of course, interest rates in Brazil are high generally, right? But on a relative basis, it lowers the cost of borrowing. And it's a great success story. Now, with the new debentures, you probably will have a more sort of even level of competition because you're giving, you know, the tax incentive, let's say, to the borrower rather than to the investor, right? But I think looking at the way the natural persons, right, or individuals invest in infrastructure, and it is such a significant amount of pool of capital, you do sort of price out more traditional institutional investors, which I think will be corrected now with the new legislation. And I think there is a lot of demand for investing in the green economy, right? And I was yesterday at the Brazil Climate Summit. Brazil really has all the elements of being the leading emerging markets in this green transition because it has the natural resources, right? It has the forest, it has the ability of absorbing emissions, right, through and reforestation, etc. Has a legislative framework that even if it's not perfect, is much better than many other countries have, right? So not everything is just is wrong in Brazil. So Brazil has the natural resources, has the domestic capital market to support it, has a legal framework that kind of works. So I think that these incentives should bring more investment into Brazil. The demand is there. People understand the country, understand the risk, that there are risks associated with Brazil, but it's something that people investors are familiar with, right? And programs such as this Eco Invest, which is the subsidized line set up by the IDB with the central government, that's now it's starting to flow through. I think they have the first auction now, will really help meet sort of the demands from the projects with the international capital that is available, right? Currency, one taxation and the other one is the currency risk. So I see really a lot of potential to help, because there's not that many other places to invest in scale in that green transition. Brazil definitely is, of emerging markets, is probably the top destination.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Isabella. Interesting. And we have one question now that I believe dovetails exactly to the point you just made on the investments on green economy. The question from Tomás da Graça Berlo. Yeah, thank you. That has to do, in fact. His question is, what, if anything, is stopping Brazil from becoming a leader in green energy? And I open for both of you, whatever you believe would apply in your views from your perspectives, from a Brazilian legal tax framework perspective and from the foreign investors' perspective.
Well, I can say from my point of view, I think it's very hard for Brazil, even from a fiscal point of view, to pass like an Inflation Reduction Act as you had in the US, right? The size of the US economy and the ability of subsidizing investment is much greater than Brazil. So you can't, once the US decides to go there, that nobody can beat them. So there are even emerging market companies that are going to set up operations in the US to take advantage of the tax incentives. But at the end of the day, it shouldn't be a race. It's not a competition, right? We will need to reduce carbon everywhere, right? So I think, yes, the US at the moment is absorbing a lot of the investments, but there's just the needs are everywhere. So I think within emerging markets, Brazil definitely has a leading role for all the reasons I mentioned, and it will be the leading country in that green transition.
Right. Andrea, your views?
Yes, I think as you very correctly point out in the beginning of this webinar, Braga, I mean, there is the need, okay, tax incentives will definitely play a role in the decisions. We see the impacts of the IRA in the US and some other similar measures elsewhere in the globe. But I mean, I think legal stability is a key issue. I mean, we have, for instance, the discussions on offshore wind in Brazil, right? We have all, let's say, the interest, even of the big oil companies. I think maybe half of the there is 200 gigabytes in projects pre-approved. Maybe half of those would belong to the IOCs and the like. But we really see, no one can really say that there will be actual investment in the coming months. I mean, pending regulations on that segment. Okay, Brazil is a big country. There is a lot of solar and wind onshore already. There were some incentives up to 1 or 2 years ago. There was March of 22, if I'm not mistaken, that okay, there would be the waiver of some connection fees to the grid, that especially for smaller projects. Yeah. Would be, let's say, a key issue. But I mean, if we take, let's say, any such projects, we have a tax risk there. Most of them are sliced in several SPEs, that each of them, let's say, benefiting from the lucro presumido, for instance, that's true. And we always have, let's say, the uncertainties. Will the tax authority ever challenge these, let's say, segregation of a single project in several SPEs, each, let's say, benefiting from the deemed profit regime, that we even don't know if it will be kept as it is in the income tax reform that is about to come. It should be a long ways, but maybe after the consumptions reform that we have. So I think these are some examples of legal uncertainties, even in the tax area, that I think is preventing Brazil from becoming a leader in green energy, despite all, let's say, the resources and the good conditions and the opportunities that the country would have for for such a role.
That's I totally agree with both of you, actually. Legal certainty that might be lacking for us to really materialize that role in becoming a leader in green energy. And likewise, the competition among jurisdictions, as the US did by creating a very effective program of tax relief that sort of absorbed and sucks investment from all over the world to the US rather than to other countries. Thank you, Thomas, for your participation. And I think we're already reaching our conclusion time here. Thank you very much again, Isabella and Andrea. It was a privilege to have you both with us and addressing such an important topic for Brazil. And let's hope that we can perhaps reconvene last year with even better news on more clear framework legally and tax-wise, and more certainty to the foreign investor to have Brazil as a destination for the projects on infrastructure it so intensely needs. Thank you all attending as well. Please keep an eye on the events of the Tax Committee of the Brazilian Chamber of Commerce in the Brazilian Chamber's LinkedIn profile and website. We look forward to have all of you joining next time as well. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.